The vampire king came home early, his maid whispered. "Stay silent." What he saw changed everything. The citadel of black stone stood quiet against the sky, its towers wrapped in mist and memory. No horn sounded. No guards announced him. Even the shadows seemed startled, pulling back as if they had not expected their master so soon. The king dismounted alone. His cloak moved like smoke behind him, heavy with the dust of distant roads and unspoken wars. His face was calm, carved by centuries of rule, but his eyes carried something unsettled. He had returned early for no reason he could name. The battle beyond the northern mountains had ended without warning, and with it, his restlessness had only grown stronger. Something had called him home. Inside the citadel, the halls bowed in silence. Torches burned low, their flames trembling as he passed. The walls remembered him. They always did. Every step echoed with power, yet tonight that power felt thin, stretched tight like a string about to break. The king slowed near the servant's wing. He did not know why. Kings rarely walked here. This place was built for quiet feet and lowered eyes, for people who were meant to pass unseen. Yet his steps carried him forward, guided by an unseen pull. The air felt different, heavy, watchful, as though the castle itself was holding its breath. That was when she felt him. Eloin paused in the narrow corridor, a silver tray held carefully in her hands. She had been born into silence, or so she had always believed. The curse lay on her like a second skin. It kept her voice locked behind her teeth, her words trapped before they could become sound. For years she had lived this way, serving, listening, observing, never speaking unless spoken to, and never even then. But tonight something cracked. Her heart began to race, not from fear but from recognition. A deep, painful knowing rose inside her, sharp and sudden. The air shifted. The stones beneath her feet felt colder. He is here, she should not have known. No bells had rung. No servants had whispered. And yet her body reacted as if to an old memory waking from sleep. Eloin turned slowly. At the far end of the hall, the king stood still, his shadow long and dark against the torchlight. His presence filled the corridor, heavy and undeniable. He was taller than any man she had known, his posture straight with command. Power clung to him, not loud but absolute. Their eyes met. For a single breath, time paused. Something passed between them. Not recognition, at least not clearly, but a feeling too sharp to ignore. The king felt it first. A strange ache, old and familiar, like a forgotten name whispered in his mind. The maid lowered her gaze at once, as she had been trained to do, but it was too late. He had already seen her. The king took a step forward, then another. His footsteps echoed softly. He had not intended to stop her, yet his body moved before his thoughts could catch up. "Maid," he said calmly. The word echoed like a command written into the stone. Eloin's fingers tightened around the tray. Her chest burned. She was not allowed to speak. The curse pressed against her throat, warning her, punishing her before she even tried. Yet fear surged through her, not for herself. Behind the next door lay a chamber that did not exist on any map, a sealed place. A place the king had forbidden long ago, though he could no longer remember why. She had been guarding it for years. The king's eyes drifted past her, toward the dark wooden door at the end of the corridor. It stood untouched, marked with old symbols worn smooth by time. The air around it felt wrong, thick, heavy, alive. He felt drawn to it. Eloin knew what would happen if he reached it. Her heart pounded. Pain spread through her chest as she made a choice she had never made before. She lifted her head. "Stay silent." The words escaped her lips in a breath, fragile and trembling. Pain struck her at once, sharp and deep, as if her lungs had forgotten how to breathe. She nearly dropped the tray. Her knees weakened, but she stayed standing, gripping the edge of the wall. The king froze. No servant had spoken to him without permission in over 100 years. Slowly he turned back to her. "What did you say?" he asked. His voice was not angry. That made it worse. Eloin could not answer. The curse tightened, stealing her breath. She shook her head slightly, eyes lowered again, her body shaking with the effort of standing. The king studied her in silence. Something about her felt wrong, or perhaps right in a way he did not understand. Her fear was not the usual fear of servants. It was older, sharper, filled with purpose. He stepped closer. "What lies behind that door?" he asked quietly. Eloan's heart broke. She wanted to warn him. She wanted to beg him to leave. But her voice was gone again, sealed away as punishment. All she could do was press her back against the wall, placing herself between him and the door. The king frowned. He did not remember placing guards here, yet she stood as if bound to the space, her body acting on duty older than thought. "You are afraid," he said. Her eyes flickered up to his face. For a moment something shone there, grief perhaps, or longing, he could not tell. Then the door behind her began to tremble, not loudly, not violently, just enough to be felt. The torches flickered. The king felt it then, the pull that had drawn him home. The truth he had avoided for centuries, hidden deep within the walls of his own kingdom. "Move aside," he commanded. Eloan did not move. The door creaked. A cold breath of air slipped into the corridor, carrying with it a feeling of deep sorrow, ancient and endless. The king's chest tightened. Images flashed through his mind, dreams he had never understood, a woman standing beside a throne, eyes full of trust. Eyes like hers. He looked at the maid again, truly this time. Her face was pale, worn by quiet endurance, but her eyes burned with recognition. Tears trembled there unshed. "I know you," he whispered. The door opened a single inch, and with it the knight seemed to lean closer, waiting to see what the king would remember. The door did not open fully. It stopped, breathing softly as if waiting. The vampire king raised one hand and the shadows around him stilled. The torches stopped shaking. The air grew calm but heavy, like a held secret. He did not step forward. For the first time in centuries, he felt something close to hesitation. Eloan stood frozen before him. Her heart still burned from the pain of speaking. Each breath felt sharp, but she welcomed it. Pain meant the curse had not taken everything. Not yet. The king looked at her again, slower this time. "You spoke," he said. "That should not be possible." Eloan lowered her eyes. Her hands shook, but she did not move away from the door. Every part of her body told her to stay, to guard, to endure. The king turned his gaze back to the narrow opening in the door. Cold air slipped through, carrying a deep sadness that pressed against his chest. It felt familiar, like a wound that never healed because it had never been named. "What is this place?" he asked. The question was not a command. It was almost a plea. Eloan's throat tightened. She tried to speak again, knowing the cost. The curse reacted at once, wrapping around her chest like iron. She gasped softly and fell to one knee. The king moved without thought. He caught her before she hit the stone floor. The moment he touched her, the world shifted. A sharp feeling passed between them, memory, warmth, grief. The king's breath caught. He had touched countless people across centuries, but never had it felt like this. Her presence struck something deep inside him, something buried and aching. Eloan froze in his arms. No king had ever touched her gently. No one had held her like this. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and hot. The king stiffened. He had not meant to hold her so close, yet he did not let go. "You are bound," he said quietly. "Not by fear, not by loyalty." His fingers brushed her wrist. He felt the faint pulse of magic there, old, layered, cruelly precise. "A curse," he whispered. Eloan nodded once. He helped her stand but did not release her right away. When he finally stepped back, the space between them felt too large, too empty. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Eloan swallowed. She looked toward the door, then back at him. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her hand and pointed, not outward, not to the court, not to the past. She pointed to him. The king stared. "That is not possible," he said. His voice remained calm, but something sharp cracked beneath it. "I do not curse servants." Eloan shook her head. She pressed her hand against her chest, then lifted it slowly, shaping a word without sound. Not a servant. The king's thoughts spun. Images rose without warning. A younger throne room, candlelight. A woman standing beside him, not below, her voice clear, steady, unafraid. He saw hands clasped over a dark stone altar. Words spoken in desperation, not cruelty. The images shattered. He stepped back, pressing one hand to his temple. "No," he said softly, "I would remember." The door behind Aloan shuddered again. This time a low hum filled the hall like a deep breath drawn by the castle itself. Symbols along the door began to glow faintly, answering something in the king's blood. Aloan's knees weakened. The curse flared, reacting to his nearness, to his awareness. Her silence was breaking, not because it was ending, but because it was being noticed. The king looked at her, truly looked. "You are not always here," he said slowly. "You do not move like a servant, you watch like a guardian." Her eyes filled again. He turned back to the door. "This chamber," he said, "was sealed by royal magic. Only I could have ordered it." The realization hit him like cold water, and only someone I trusted could have guarded it. Aloan pressed her forehead to the stone wall, as if holding herself together. The king felt something unfamiliar twist inside him. Guilt. Not the distant kind he felt for wars and choices long past, but sharp, present guilt, focused and personal. "Speak," he said suddenly. The word came out harsh. Aloan flinched. "I command you," he added, his voice softer but no less heavy. "Tell me the truth." The curse responded at once. Pain spread through her chest, deeper than before. Her breath shortened. Dark spots edged her vision. The king saw it. "Enough," he said sharply, stepping back. The magic released her slightly. She collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. His hands clenched at his sides. "What have I done?" he whispered. He had ruled for centuries, guided by law, prophecy, and survival. He had made terrible choices for what he believed was the greater good. But this felt different. This felt wrong. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. The court was waking. The king straightened, the weight of his crown settling back onto his shoulders. He could not allow witnesses. He could not allow questions. Yet he could not walk away. "You will come with me," he said. Aloan looked up, fear and hope tangled in her eyes. "Not as a maid," he continued. "As my guest." The word shocked them both. He turned, signaling the shadows. The corridor darkened slightly, hiding them from distant eyes. As they walked, Aloan felt the pull between them grow stronger. The closer she was to him, the weaker the curse felt, yet also more painful, as if resisting change. They entered a quiet chamber high above the court, a room filled with old tapestries and windows sealed against dawn. The king closed the door. Silence fell. "You were something to me," he said at last. "I do not remember what, but I feel it." Aloan lifted her hand, slowly shaping another silent word. "Chosen," his breath caught. "Why would I silence you?" he asked. Tears spilled freely now. She touched her throat, then pointed to his heart. The meaning struck him all at once. He had feared weakness, feared attachment, feared losing his throne to love, memory, or mercy. "So I erased you," he said hoarsely. The room seemed to darken, "and called it duty." The door behind them creaked softly. The sealed chamber below answered, alive and aware. Something ancient was waking. And this time, it was not willing to remain silent. Morning did not come. The sun had not touched the citadel in centuries, yet the night itself seemed uneasy. Clouds moved too fast across the sky, and the air around the towers felt restless, as if something unseen had begun to turn. Inside the high chamber, silence pressed hard. The vampire king stood near the window, his back straight, his hands clasped behind him. He had not moved since Aloan revealed the truth without words. The weight of memory sat heavy on his shoulders, though the memories themselves refused to return fully. Aloan stood across the room. She no longer bowed. Not because she felt bold, but because something old within her would not allow it. The curse still bound her voice, but it no longer felt like a chain alone. It felt like a door shaking on its hinges. "You were chosen," the king said again, quietly, as if testing the sound of it. Eloin nodded. She stepped closer, her movements careful. With slow hands she traced a shape in the air, a crown, then a circle, then a line between two figures. A bond. The king closed his eyes. "I bound you to the throne," he said, "to protect it." Her eyes darkened with pain. "And to protect myself," he added. He turned to face her. "When I first took the crown," he continued, "the prophecy was clear. I would rule long, I would rule strong. But my heart would be my end." Eloin lifted her hand to her chest. He met her gaze. "So I removed the risk," he said, "or I believed I did." The room trembled slightly, as if the walls had heard him and did not agree. From far below, a low sound echoed through the stone. Not a roar, not a cry, a pulse, slow and deep. The sealed chamber was waking. Eloin staggered, gripping the edge of the table. Pain flashed through her body. The curse reacted sharply to the sound, tightening around her like a warning. The king reached for her again, then stopped. He could feel it now. Every time he drew closer, the magic pulled tighter, as if testing them both. "Tell me how to stop it," he said. She shook her head. She pressed her palm flat against the floor, then slowly raised it, showing him an empty hand. "Nothing." His jaw tightened. "You mean to tell me," he said carefully, "that there is no simple way?" Eloin looked up at him. Her eyes held both apology and truth. There was no easy path. There never had been. The doors burst open. Not violently, but urgently. A tall figure entered, dressed in dark robes marked with silver thread. The high advisor bowed deeply, though his eyes flicked at once to Eloin. "My king," he said. "The court is restless. The wards around the lower halls are changing." The king said nothing. "The sealed chamber," the advisor continued carefully, "has not stirred in generations. If it wakes fully—" "I know," the king interrupted. The advisor hesitated. "There is also talk," he added, "of the Maid." Eloin stiffened. "They say she walks freely," the advisor said, "that she stands unpunished in your presence." The king turned slowly. "Be careful," he said, his voice calm but sharp as ice. The advisor bowed again, deeper this time. "Forgive me," he said, "but the queens of the outer realms watch closely. Weakness invites challenge." Eloin lowered her gaze, guilt tightening her chest. The king dismissed the advisor with a wave. When the door closed, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was heavy with choice. "They will come for you," he said to Eloin, "if they believe you are my weakness." She lifted her head. Slowly she shook it. Then she pointed, not to herself but to him. "You are right," he said softly. "I am the weakness." The admission tasted strange, bitter, true. Another pulse shook the room. This time the king staggered. He pressed a hand to his chest, breathing hard. Something deep inside him pulled, stretched thin like a thread about to snap. Eloin rushed to him without thinking. The moment she touched him, the pain eased for both of them. They froze. The magic reacted instantly, not with force but with recognition. The bond. It had never been broken, only buried. "You anchor it," he whispered. "And it anchors me," she nodded. The truth settled between them like falling ash. "If the chamber fully wakes," he said slowly, "it will demand balance." Eloin's hands trembled. Balance meant sacrifice. From the corridor beyond the chamber, voices rose. More footsteps. The court was gathering. The king straightened. "They will not see you as anything but a threat," he said, "and they will not wait for answers." Eloin's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I can hide you," he offered, "send you beyond the citadel." She shook her head at once. She placed her hand over his heart. Too late. The door beneath them groaned. A deep light began to rise through the floor, slow and steady, like a heartbeat made visible. The king closed his eyes. "All my life," he said quietly, "I believed power meant control." Eloin watched him, waiting. "But this," he continued, "this asks for surrender." The light grew brighter. The bond pulled tighter. From below, the sealed chamber called not with words but with truth. The king opened his eyes. "If I choose you," he said, "I may lose my crown." Aloan lifted her hands and gently placed them back at his sides, as if returning something he had dropped. "Choose what is right." The floor cracked slightly, glowing through the stone. Guards shouted in the distance. Time was running out. The king took a step forward, then another, toward the door that led down, toward the truth he had buried. He reached back and held Aloan's hand. For the first time she did not feel pain, only warmth, only fear, only hope. The stairs spiraled downward into the heart of the citadel. The vampire king walked first, his steps steady, though his chest felt tight with every breath. Aloan walked beside him, her hand still in his. The light beneath the stone floor followed them, slow and steady, like a living guide. Above them, the voices of the court echoed in confusion and fear. Below them, the sealed chamber waited. The air grew colder as they descended. The walls changed. The stone darkened, etched with old symbols that glowed faintly as the king passed. These marks were older than his crown, older than his name. They told a story of balance, of power shared and power lost. Aloan felt the curse shift again. It no longer burned. It pulled. At the bottom of the stairs stood the chamber door, now fully awake. The wood had turned black as night, the symbols alive with pale light. The door did not resist them. It opened slowly, like an eye finally willing to see. Inside, the chamber was vast and quiet. At its center stood a stone circle. Above it hovered a soft glow, neither bright nor dark, but deep, like a memory given shape. The air hummed with old magic, calm but demanding. The king stepped forward. At once the glow responded, lifting higher, brighter. "This is the heart of the bond," he said softly, "the truth I buried." Aloan felt tears gather in her eyes. She knew this place, not from memory alone, but from feeling. Every year of silence, every quiet step she had taken as a maid had led here. The king released her hand. He walked into the circle alone. The light wrapped around him, not harshly but firmly, like hands asking him to stop. "Kneel," a voice echoed, not loud, not cruel, but endless. The king hesitated. For centuries he had knelt to no one, but now his shoulders lowered. Slowly he bent his knee, then the other. He knelt. The room trembled, not with anger but with relief. "I ruled through fear of loss," he said, his voice clear and honest. "I silenced truth to protect power. I bound a soul to save my crown." The light pulsed. Aloan watched, her heart breaking and healing at once. "I see now," the king continued, "that power taken is power hollow. Immortality gained through silence is not life." The glow shifted. The curse inside Aloan stirred sharply, then began to loosen. She gasped, dropping to her knees as warmth spread through her chest. The king looked at her, pain and regret in his eyes. "I ask no forgiveness," he said, "only balance." The light turned toward Aloan. She felt words rise to her throat, real words not shaped by pain or fear. For the first time in her life, she spoke without suffering. "I was not your weakness," she said, her voice steady. "I was your anchor." The chamber answered with a deep, gentle sound. The bond revealed itself, not as chains but as threads of light connecting them, heart to heart. It had never been meant to silence her. It had been meant to remind him, but he had misunderstood. The light brightened, then slowly began to divide, half flowing into Aloan, half into the king. The curse broke. Aloan cried out, not in pain but in release. Years of silence fell away like dust. Her body shook as breath and voice and self returned fully. The king gasped. Something deep inside him cracked, not his body but the endless hold of time. His immortality loosened, settling into something quieter, truer. The light faded. The chamber grew still. Above them, the citadel groaned as ancient magic reset itself. Wards shifted. The crown responded. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. The court burst into the chamber, guards and advisors filling the space with fear and shock. They froze. The vampire king stood, not glowing, not distant, but changed. His presence was still strong, but no longer cold. Aloan stood beside him, no longer bowed, no longer silent. "She is under my protection," the king said. "Not as servant, not as secret," the court murmured. "I bound her," he continued, "and I unbound her, let this be known." A queen of the outer realm stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You have weakened yourself," she said. "The night will test you." The king met her gaze. "Let it," he replied. The room fell silent. The challenge did not come. The night did not strike. Instead, dawn touched the highest tower of the citadel for the first time in centuries. Light spilled through the chamber doorway, pale and unsure, but real. The court stepped back in awe. Days passed. The kingdom changed, not all at once, not easily, but it changed. The king ruled still, but with counsel, not fear. The crown no longer demanded silence, but truth. The sealed chamber became a place of memory, not shame. Elowen walked freely through the halls, her voice heard, her presence acknowledged. She did not take a throne, nor did she vanish into shadow. She stood beside the king, not above, not below. At dusk one evening they stood on the balcony together. "The night feels different," Elowen said. The king nodded. "I do too." He looked at her not as ruler to servant, but as one soul to another. "I lost eternity," he said quietly. She smiled, gentle and sure. "No," she replied. "You chose life." Below them the kingdom breathed, no longer held in silence but balanced between night and dawn. And for the first time, the vampire king did not fear what the future might take. He welcomed what it might become.